Why you don't have to explain your choices to everyone. Have you ever made a choice that felt right in your heart, only to be met with silence, raised eyebrows, or a flood of questions you didn't ask for? Maybe you decided to sell your house and move somewhere quieter. Or you finally said no to a family gathering because your body needed rest more than it needed small talk. Maybe you cut off a relationship that had been draining you for years. Whatever it was, you felt lighter afterward. Freer. Like you were finally listening to yourself. But then came the voices. Oh, why would you do that now? Are you sure that's the best decision? Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? And suddenly, that peaceful feeling starts to slip away. You find yourself justifying your actions, defending your peace, trying to explain something they may never truly understand, because they weren't the one living it. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. As we get older, people seem to think we owe them more explanations, not fewer. Isn't that odd? After decades of raising families, working hard, showing up for others, somehow we're expected to run our decisions through a public opinion filter. And if we don't, we're labeled selfish, stubborn, or even going through something. But here's what I want to tell you, gently, and with love, you do not owe everyone an explanation. Not for your peace. Not for your boundaries. Not for the things you say yes to, and especially not for the things you say no to. You have the right to choose what's best for you, without writing an essay about it every time. And that's not because you're older, it's because you're wiser. You've spent your whole life learning what drains you, what feeds you, what lifts you up, and what tears you down. At this point, your choices come from experience. And still, even with all that wisdom in your bones, there will always be people who try to question it. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's old friends. Sometimes it's people who love you but just don't get it. And that's okay. They don't have to. Because what they see is only the surface. They don't know the late nights you spent worrying, or the quiet pain you carried without making a scene. They don't know the freedom you feel when you finally put yourself first. It's not easy to stop explaining. For most of us, it's a habit. We grew up being taught to be polite, to be agreeable, to avoid upsetting anyone. Especially as women, many of us were raised to believe that keeping the peace meant staying silent about what we really needed. But now, you've earned the right to do things differently. When you say no to something that drains you, that's not being rude. That's being kind to yourself. When you choose rest over obligation, that's not being lazy. That's being wise with your energy. When you walk away from something that no longer serves you, that's not being dramatic. That's being honest with your soul. The truth is, people will always have opinions. They'll try to make your story fit into their understanding of life. But their version doesn't have to be yours. Their comfort zone isn't your boundary. And their judgment isn't your truth. And you know what else? Sometimes, when we stop explaining ourselves, we give others permission to do the same. We become an example. We show our children, our friends, even strangers, that it's possible to live with quiet confidence. That it's okay to choose peace without making a public announcement. There's a certain strength in that kind of silence. Not the silence that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from being rooted. From knowing who you are and what you need. From no longer needing the world's permission to follow your heart. And yes, that kind of strength can make people uncomfortable. That's not your burden to carry. You're not here to live your life as a series of justifications. You're here to live with intention. With clarity. With dignity. So the next time someone asks you to explain why you did what you did, you can take a deep breath, smile gently, and say, because it was the right choice for me. And that's enough. Now, let's sit with that truth for a moment, because it was the right choice for me. How powerful is that? Not angry. Not defensive. Just calm. Rooted. Done. But getting to that place doesn't happen overnight, especially when you've spent most of your life putting others first. You've probably been the one who held the family together, who showed up even when tired, who nodded and smiled even when your heart said otherwise. You did what needed to be done, and you did it without complaint. But now is your time to choose differently. And one of the biggest shifts you can make is learning to let go of the need for validation. That itch to explain, to seek approval, to soften the blow of your decisions with long-winded justifications, it's not really about others understanding you. It's about you wanting to feel safe in your choice. But true safety doesn't come from outside approval. It comes from trusting your own voice. It comes from remembering that your lived experience matters more than someone else's opinion of it. Sometimes people will react because your choices remind them of the ones they're not brave enough to make. You say no to a family pattern, and suddenly they feel exposed. You step away from drama, and they feel left behind. You choose your peace, and they call it selfish, not because it is, but because they're unfamiliar with what it looks like. Let them sit with that. You don't have to carry their discomfort. You don't have to fix their feelings. You don't have to shrink your truth to fit into their comfort zone. Think about how many times you've said yes when your heart whispered no, how often you've stayed silent to avoid rocking the boat. How many moments of your life were shaped not by your desires, but by other people's expectations. Now imagine how free you'd feel if you stopped explaining. Not in a cold or careless way, but in a quiet, grounded, graceful way. You cancel a plan because you need rest. No explanation. You decide to spend your holidays alone, in reflection. No explanation. You change your mind, your direction, your beliefs, because you've grown. No explanation. That doesn't mean you shut everyone out. It just means you stop handing over the map to people who aren't walking your road. And yes, at first, it might feel uncomfortable. You may worry that people will think you've changed. And you know what? They're right. You have changed. You've grown into someone who values peace over pleasing. Someone who no longer needs to rehearse every decision in fear of being misunderstood. Someone who has learned that being misunderstood is not the worst thing in the world, being drained, bitter, or resentful is. You don't owe them your past version just to keep them comfortable. You don't owe them emotional acrobatics to soften every truth you live. You simply owe yourself honesty. That's what this stage of life can be about, not surviving, not proving, not performing. But living, truly living. In a way that's deeply aligned with your heart, your energy, your wisdom. There's nothing selfish about that. In fact, when you start honoring yourself without needing applause, you become more present. More whole. You begin to attract relationships that are rooted in truth, not performance. You stop trying to convince people of your worth and start surrounding yourself with those who already see it. Because there's nothing more liberating than realizing you don't need to be understood to be at peace. You don't need a panel of approval to follow what feels right. And you definitely don't need to turn your heart into a courtroom every time someone raises a doubtful eyebrow. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to stop explaining. Just be the choice. Stand in it. Breathe in it. Walk forward in it. And let them figure out their own story while you live yours. And here's the beautiful part, when you finally stop explaining yourself, something surprising happens. You begin to hear yourself more clearly. Your inner voice, the one that's been quieted for years by noise, pressure, guilt, it gets louder. Not in a shouting way, but in a way that feels like coming home. It starts to guide you, not with fear, but with clarity. You begin to realize that every decision you make doesn't need a stamp of approval. It just needs to feel right in your body. In your spirit. In the quiet moments when no one's watching, when no one's asking questions, when it's just you and your breath, those are the moments that tell the truth. And the truth is, you are allowed to change. You are allowed to protect your time. You are allowed to live slowly, softly, differently. You are allowed to prioritize peace over performance. You are allowed to say, this is what I need right now, without following it up with 1,000 reasons. Some people won't get it. That's okay. Some people will gossip about it. That's okay too. Some people will pull away, because they were only ever comfortable with you when you were putting yourself last. That's more than okay. That's freedom. Because what you're doing isn't about being unkind. It's about being real. Real with yourself. Real with what you can give and what you can't anymore. Real with the fact that your time is precious, your energy is sacred, and your life, your one precious life, is yours to live. You don't have to explain why you didn't answer the phone. You don't have to justify why you said no to that invitation. You don't need to unpack the details of your health, your finances, your personal choices just to satisfy someone's curiosity. You're not a book everyone gets to flip through. You're a whole, breathing story, written carefully, lived intentionally, and guarded by someone who has finally learned to trust herself. That kind of trust? It changes everything. You begin to walk differently. Speak differently. Choose differently. You stop trying to be agreeable and start being authentic. You stop bending and start blooming. And in that blooming, you find your people, the ones who don't need long explanations, who don't guilt you for your boundaries, who respect your no as much as your yes. The ones who love you not because you're available all the time, but because you're you, whole, honest, evolving. That's what we all deserve, isn't it? To live as ourselves, not as who others expect us to be. To spend this season of life not explaining, not apologizing, but experiencing, fully, deeply, freely. So if you needed permission, let this be it. If you needed a reminder, let this be one. You don't need to explain why you chose peace. You don't need to explain why you let something go. You don't need to explain why you said yes, or why you said no. You don't need to explain why you chose you. You are not too much. You are not too selfish. You are not wrong for wanting a life that fits you better than the one you've outgrown. You are simply becoming. And that becoming doesn't require a speech. Just breath. Just courage. Just the quiet decision to honor who you are now, not who the world thinks you should be. So go ahead. Choose yourself. Honor your path. Protect your peace. And if anyone asks you why, smile gently and say, I don't need to explain. I just need to live. Here's to living your truth, boldly, quietly, and beautifully. One decision at a time. And if this message speaks to your heart, I hope you'll take a moment to share it. Leave a comment. Let others know they're not alone. And if you're ready for more reminders that your life still holds power, meaning, and beauty, click that subscribe button. We're building a space here for wisdom, courage, and deep conversations. And I'd love for you to be part of it. Until next time, walk gently, stand tall, and never forget, you don't have to explain a thing.